museum itself stands in memory of 2 world wars. But we're better than the city's War Memorial Museum, a place of reflection to consider where we've been and where we're headed. The only warring tonight will be the battle of ideas, and there will be interjections rather than eruptions, but it's good that we have this place to talk. So, on behalf of Auckland Museum, welcome. This is your whare, and your views are welcome. Please tweet us with the hashtag AMLate, and we can answer your questions, hopefully, maybe, if they're sensible, during the panel discussion. I'd like to thank the sponsorship partner for this series, Paperboy, a free weekly magazine dedicated to an emergent Auckland. And I have to say, as a journalist, it cheers me immensely to see Paperboy and have it affirmed that print ain't dead yet. And it further cheers me to introduce tonight's entertainment. 2 years ago, White Man Behind a Desk appeared as an online video series. It was smart, historically literate, from one so young, and funny. More recently, it made its debut as a stage production, but only in Wellington. And at this point in my notes, I was going to say, we've fixed that. But shortly after we invited Robbie Nicol, who is White Man Behind a Desk, the little trollop did a gig in Auckland. But this is the biggest audience he's played to in Auckland. So please welcome Robbie Nicol, White Man Behind a Desk.
Kia ora, everyone. Hello, haere mai. Hi, as Russell said, hi this side of the room. Also, hi to this side of the room. Good to see you. As Russell said, so I'm a web series guy, and I'm Robbie, and this is Mitchell. That's enough, Mitchell. So the idea basically is that we tour around the country and we film comic monologues, and we look for studio audiences who will do the job of laughing for us. Obviously, it's not a fun job, it's a hard job, it's a difficult job, but we just want to say thanks for volunteering to do that job today. Thanks so much. Give yourselves a round of applause. You did it! You're doing the hard slog. We're proud of you. Okay, there's a couple of ground rules. I want to treat you like adults, but if you do need to go to the toilet, just give me one of these, okay? That's ideal. Again, don't want to patronize you, but can I just see practice? Just quick practice of that. Okay, a lot of you think you're above this, okay? You're not. Okay, that's not going to work. Also, emergency exits. If there is an emergency, you'll exit. Okay, so basically, the third rule, the most important rule, is obviously I will sit behind the desk. I will do the monologue. Okay, Mitchell will record the monologue, and obviously you will laugh at the monologue. That's your job. Don't think about the jokes. Okay? That's quite important. If you're going to stop to think about the jokes, okay, we're going to be here all night. So just if it has the cadence of a joke, it's your job to make the laughing sound at the end, okay? See a lot of you sort of sniggering and smiling. I just want to make it really clear, we don't want smiles, okay? I hope that's been... We've got a little bit of a saying we like to say about smiles. What's the saying, Mitchell? Don't swear, Mitchell, don't swear. Yes, fuck smiles. Okay, so we're going to start with just a quick warm up, just to make you a little bit louder. So everyone, if I could just have, so I'm just going to do a chant. Okay, so when I say white, you say man. Ready? White! Man. That sounded very neo-Nazi, so we're not going to do that again. And if you could just not chant white man again for the rest of the show, that would be great for all of us. So we're just going to start. Could I just get a number between 10 and 20, please? What was that? Thank you. The old white man in the fourth row. Always good that people feel comfortable to speak up. Okay, 18. Just going to... Okay. Okay, great. 18 is the truth. If you could just prepare the truth monologue, Mitchell. Is that... You feeling good? You feeling great? Okay, great. Okay, just do a quick warm-up. That's private. You didn't have to look at that. Yep, I'm good to go, Mitchell. Yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Kia ora, my name is Robbie, and I'm another white man behind a desk, and we are live at Late 2017. Pretty good. That's pretty good. That's right, it's late 2017, the event for lefty pacifists held in a war museum. Today we're talking about the truth. Yes, the truth. The thing that Tom Cruise famously demanded. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. And as it turns out, my stunning impression of Jack Nicholson is right. We can't handle the truth, especially if it's Tom Cruise's version of the truth, because that involves spirits possessing your body and an alien named Xenu and being attacked by David Miscavige. Allegedly. I have to say allegedly. But even without the threat of David Miscavige, it's difficult to question the things you believe. So difficult, in fact, that people are willing to grab at almost any fact that seems to support their current opinion. For example, during the Brexit campaign, Boris Johnson frequently repeated that the UK was sending £350 million to the European Union, which it was not. Last month he repeated the claim, saying, once we have settled our accounts, we will take back control of roughly £350 million per week. Unfortunately, over the last year, while that lie has helped Boris win the Brexit campaign and become Foreign Secretary, it has not become true. Here in New Zealand, politicians have been misusing statistics for years. In 2011, John Key told Stephen Sackur that he could find a researcher to support any opinion. So the opinion of all scientists was effectively irrelevant. And when a report said his 90-day trial policy's main effects were a decrease in dismissal costs and uncertainty about job security, he refused to engage with the report. Instead, he charmed us all with a delightful anecdote about a fictional employer. So that was nice. By 2017, however, things started to get a lot more Boris Johnson-y. Stephen Joyce claimed that the Labour Party had an $11.7 billion hole in their budget. And just like when I put 6'4" on my Tinder profile, this was a blatant lie deliberately designed to prevent citizens from making a rational choice. And I apologize. The right-wing commentariat argued that this was an example of Cunningham's law, which states the best way to get the right answer on the internet is not to ask a question, it's to post the wrong answer. And while Cunningham's law might get you the correct release date for a film on Wikipedia, the actions of Stephen Joyce and Bill English might be described as a tad more... It's extremely damaging to democracy, I guess is how you might phrase it. I mean, back when Key was our Prime Minister, Corin Dan asked him whether he was concerned by his party's lies, and Key said, look at our numbers. Okay, Corin? Our numbers aren't moving in your TV1 poll or anything else. Okay? That's true. Boris Johnson won the Brexit debate. Joyce stopped the tide of Jacinda mania. So the question is, why do the polls seem to be so disconnected from the facts? Well, look, it's never been fun to be confronted by opinions you don't agree with. But with social media and a cynical public that doesn't trust the mainstream media, you never have to face those opinions again. People have built entire careers sitting on your newsfeed yelling half-baked arguments that make you feel better about things you already believe. I mean, it's not a career yet, but I am working on it. The important point is bite-sized content like this, it can be affirming and entertaining, but it won't help you with the truth, because the truth is hard work. If you are an activist, we will be your cheerleader, but for the truth, you need journalists, because the truth is complicated, because smart people disagree with you, because the universe is a massive, swirling kitchen sink, and we're just the ants that happen to crawl in, totally baffled and about to die. Look, the internet can be a brilliant place, like that time a monkey rode a pig, but most of the time, it's an unreferenced wilderness where people go to confirm their biases. And while journalism doesn't have the money to get onto your newsfeed, there are a few things you can do to challenge your own ideas. You can share things that seem true, even if you think it might not be what your friends want to hear. You can put your friends' ideological content into some perspective. And most importantly, don't just share videos made by people like me. And if all of that seems to be a little bit too hard, then here's a video made by me.
Hi there, I'm Robbie Nicol, and apparently you just shared something
Hold on.
political on social media. Was it unreferenced or out of context? Don't worry, I'm from the internet too. So I'm going to tell you something with sincerity and confidence that has absolutely no basis in fact. With cats. Because it's the internet. Did you know that kittens love references? Mr. Buttons gets very sad when you use an unrepresentative statistic, or only share graphics made by the National Party, or the Green Party, or the Labour Party, if anyone ever tells them about social media. Did you know if you don't reference the things you share online, kittens can die of a broken heart? Meow. Meow. Oh no, I'm dying while you're campaigning for a political party that isn't even paying. No. It's true. But hey, it's not too late. You can go back and attach a reference to that thing you shared, or read something from another point of view and allow their different opinion to colour yours with nuance. Because if you don't, you're murdering kittens. Trust me, I'm from the internet.
Thank you so much. My name is Robbie, and I'm another white man behind the desk.
While we move the table and we have Robbie on stage, I thought we'd take the opportunity for a chat. My first question, Robbie, is who gave you your first opportunity in television?
Is it still on? Is it? It may have been a guy called Russell Brown.
It was indeed. That was the correct answer.
Feels like a leading question, but
Yes.
yeah, it's technically true. Yeah.
Yes. I have to say, I don't know whether you've been watching Twitter today, but or this week. Some of you may not know that Matthew Hooton has rage quit Twitter, and the other extremely funny, perceptive young man in New Zealand, Ben Uffendale, has taken it upon himself to become possessed by the spirit of Matthew Hooton, and it's actually become quite terrifying. Who would you be possessed by on Twitter?
Well, I think probably all the way back to the first video that we did, or second video that we did, and my character in the web series had a crush on Cameron Slater, which I think we all understand. We can all connect with that.
That's triggering.
Yeah. Sorry, everyone. Trigger warning. My character has a crush on Cameron Slater, and then he tweeted us XXX sweetheart. And we thought that was very progressive of him. But I would say standing in for him would be an unusual experience. I'll give it a go.
Yeah, give it a go.
If it means he's off Twitter,
Yes.
I'll give it a go.
Now, on a more serious note, I happened to watch the episode of Backbenchers where you did something pretty goddamn brave, and I wanted to talk about this because it is Mental Health Week. You talked about your own mental health struggles.
Yeah.
What I could tell by watching you that was not easy. What made you do it?
No, it's totally not easy and not super fun and not comedy, but that's okay, because this begins the discussion part of the evening. It was really tough. I had troubles with anxiety, which led to some mild depression, and I tried to get help from WINS, and then I went on a magical journey from WINS to the doctor's office, and then from the doctor's office to another psychiatrist, and then the psychiatrist was like, oh, I'm sorry, we're not affiliated with that doctor's office, and so on and so on and so on with a huge pile of forms. And when you're, a little bit too low to even get into the shower in the morning, the idea of like campaigning and advocating for yourself, when you're this close to thinking you're not worth anything, and someone says, I invite you to fight for your own worth for the next 3-4 months, that's pretty tough. So the systems, to swear like Mitchell did, fucked. And so I felt like, being public and open about that could hopefully maybe, get people talking about it a bit more and change the system a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think it was brave and it made a difference, so well done. And you are joining us again after the discussion, aren't you?
That's right, we have time to use you for one more monologue, so I'll be back. Thank you, we appreciate it.
Julia, off the stage. Now, as you hopefully know, our take tonight is privilege, and of course, who better to lead you through that than a straight, white, middle-aged man? It's actually what I thought when I was asked to do it. And it's true, I have lived the blessed life of the majority, but it's also true that life has been grounded by a profound sense of otherness. Both our young adult sons are autistic. Imagine growing up in a world not for you and whose codes are not accessible to you. Imagine starting from that place every morning of your life. So our family life has given me an insight into difference. It's an insight that informs my work as a journalist every day. And I think it's one that goes to the core of confronting privilege. The understanding that the experience of others may be very different to your own. And yet I'm also always acutely aware of the privilege of, as parents, being a pair of stroppy, articulate journalists who can get attention and information. I think about that every single time Work and Income loses a form and cuts off one of our sons' benefits without notice, which happens every time. Every time, that is, our sons have to prove they're still autistic. So privilege is both a crucial concept and actually not a simple one. It's one we need a better, broader kōrero about, one that makes it more than a cheap way to win arguments on the internet, and one that's more about understanding than accusations. I'm confident that our panellists tonight can take us some way there. Perhaps I should introduce them now. Firstly, Georgina Beyer. Georgina, come and join us. Of course, Georgina's first battle was simply to be who she was. And then she became the world's first transsexual mayor in 1995, and then the first transsexual member of parliament 4 years later. And she continues to assist in the journeys of others as a patron of Rainbow Youth. Next up, Julia Amua Whaipooti. If we're talking about history, Julia at one point was about to upgrade her job at a supermarket to a job at Mitre 10 when one of her customers told her she should aim higher, so she did. She became the first member of her whānau to go to university, and she became a lawyer. She's now a senior advisor at the Children's Commission and spokesperson for Just Speak, where she focuses on addressing inequities in the criminal justice system. Our next panellist, Tāwhanga Nopera, is an artist and scholar in the final stages of the first kaupapa Māori creative practice PhD at the University of Waikato. Tāwhanga's work embraces all the challenges on the way to that place: stigma, poverty, addiction, rape, racial discrimination, transphobia, depression, and suicidality. He's actually quite cheery given all that. And last but not least, Richard Pamatatau, the program leader at AUT University's Pacific Journalism course, and one of the best thinkers I know, especially when it comes to challenging conventional wisdom. Please welcome Richard. Right, we're good. Jolly good. One thing I thought, and I actually did find it kind of hard to write question lines for tonight, because the concept of privilege, even though we talk about it quite a lot, can be quite amorphous. And one way of grounding it, as I did in my remarks before, was to ground it in personal experience. So that's where we're going to go first. Georgina, you've written a book about your story, so you know it well.
That was a long time ago, Russell.
You made the journey from the absolute margin of society to the seat of power as an MP. What were you thinking about that journey as you did it?
Each day as it came, frankly, really a great sense of resentment that society at that time here was preventing me from reaching my potential. I sure as hell did not decide that I wanted to work in the sex industry because it was such a great career with a future. No way. I was forced there because transgender people back in my day, and I stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before me, just let me say that, forced us into living these, in the shadows of society down in that world. We had institutional discrimination and prejudice, couldn't get the dole, put your pants back on, mate, and go out there and get a job, full stop. And there was no respect for who I was transitioning into being because I was so compelled and had been since I was about 4. And so this wasn't just a choice. Who the hell would make such a choice? And I guess I just tried to push through the barriers. First of all, having to get out of the sex, and much easier to get into the sex industry than it is to get out. And the entrapment that happens there. And by that I mean I, as a transsexual, did not have access to the normal things that you might have in order to tide you over a period of unemployment or something, because they weren't going to respect who I was. I drew the line in the sand and said, no, sorry, this is who I am. I'm not changing it for anybody. And if I have to suffer the slings and arrows of your outrageousness, then so be it. And this is where I go. So I hated it from the first client I ever had to the last one I ever had. It took me about 5 years to get out of it and then get something where I didn't have to sell my body in order to make a bit of a living. Little bits and bobs, or actually government-funded PEP schemes as they were in those days. Once I got into some film and television, at the time in the mid-80s they were writing roles for people like us that told our stories properly, truthfully, a much more realistic reflection of our lives, not the caricatures of your Danny LaRue's and all of that sort of stuff. And Jules Dahl, a short film I made with Peter Wells and Stuart Main back in 1985, right on the cusp of homosexual law reform. And as it was happening there, we put a few little scenes in that film that reflected that time. It was lovely, marching in front of the Salvation Army as they came down Queen Street to have their prayer meeting in Victoria Street. Every Sunday they used to do it. And these two Mad Queens characters, we were in this film, rushed out in front of them, and they didn't know what to do except, wave their tambourines and keep going, and the trombone got a little bit more urgent, and if you know what I mean. And then they wheeled around into Victoria Street, and me and my co-star Richard Hanna just sort of marched through the shot and wondered if we'd gotten anything, because it was also ad lib doing that shot. And then the director said to us, Peter said, do you think you could just go over and stand next to them? And, oh, really, what for? Oh, just stand next to them while they're having their prayer meeting. So we did. Well, of course, the captain or the sergeant or whatever he was of the Salvation Army then hauled us out, well, I'm going to call the police, you shouldn't be doing this, and da-da-da. And so, that's included in the film. Do see it sometime. Sure, it's in the museum somewhere, it's that old. So, yes, Russell, just to carry on a bit more, I got some good TV roles, and with that Jules Dahl's film, I got nominated for Best Actress in 1987 for film and television for that role I played in that film. I didn't get the prize. Jennifer Ward-Leyland got the prize, and wonderful actress to receive it. No, I got rather something much better than that. I got acknowledged by my peers at the time in the gender to which I identified, and that is what was important to me. So I suppose with the opportunity to have a public platform and for people to sort of, do that, I began to push, I guess, some boundaries subconsciously to you all as you all went, oh, Isn't she nice? It wasn't pity, you know, and that we can move on. Then that moved to, I made a complete change in my life, of course, went to the Wairarapa, worked in our local community centre there, raged at the 91 mother of all budgets, which caused some problems for little old Carterton and the Wairarapa, but a homelessness. We took care of it. The council didn't want to help us. We thought that was outrageous. Their excuse being there was no social responsibility like that the council should have to do. And we went, excuse me, you've got pensioner housing, so why aren't we taking care of any of these little issues here? Because the government sure as hell ain't going to come rushing to help us immediately. And anyhow, we took care of that, but it began the political thing in my head. And every time it was always about, do you reckon I can do this? Should I? Okay, I'll have a go, because I'm 10 foot tall and bulletproof, always have been. And off I went and sort of had a go. So ran an election campaign, local government, failed at my first attempt and missed out by 14 votes. And for a new tranny in town, a place like Carterton, I thought I'd done pretty good. And was very happy. Consequently, there was a resignation very soon after, and the election, and from the Baptist minister who got relocated to Auckland. I hope you love him. And and so a vacancy occurred, and a by-election was going to ensue, which infuriated the ward in which we were running in, because they were quite happy. 14 votes I missed out on getting into council. They were happy for me to be appointed. But no, the council of the day said, no, we're going to have a by-election, most democratic thing to do. Also the most expensive. And when in those days in Carterton, $25,000 constituted 1% of rates, blowing $15,000 to $20,000 on a by-election for somebody they were quite happy to have, it seemed a waste of money. So that wonderful community kicked my butt into that council just like that. And I got half of the votes. The 5 other candidates got the rest and shared them. And there we were. And so that started, you know, that sort of thing.
Now, you did tell me when we talked on the phone this week to interrupt you where necessary.
I did.
Yes, we're going to come back to Parliament, because I think that it's a very interesting thing. But Julia, you broke the mould, went and studied law, and one thing that you study when you study law is who is in the criminal justice system. And you know very well from your work that it's disproportionately Māori. What was that like, sitting there, and I presume you're in a class full of white dudes, sitting there having that discussed?
Tēnā koe. Tēnā koutou katoa, he mihi tō tahi ki ngā mana whenua o tēnei rohi. Tēnā koutou katoa, tēnā koe koka mo te kōrero. Kia ora, Russell, for your pātai. I think before I answer that question directly, I have to start with just my own privilege for being able to sit on this platform to talk about my story, and recognise that there are many other people who A, can't afford to be in this room, and B, have many words to share that maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable sitting on the stage talking about. So I just want to acknowledge that space. Second thing is to say, yes, the first in my whānau to go to university, but that a measure of success isn't necessarily going to university, but having the opportunity to do that, and just acknowledge my parents for always filling me with love and kai, and making sure that no matter our material differences that we had in life, that I could do that. But I did go to law school, not to change the world or make a difference, but to earn some dollar bills. So that's the first point in that, because when I was at the supermarket, while I was at university, part of my story of being the first to go to university was that I actually didn't know how to go to university. Even though my mum told me I was going to university, because she saw it as a key to opportunities for her children, which she wanted to give to us that she didn't have. And so I didn't know how to go, so I was going to go work, and I worked at the supermarket while I was at college, and then I wanted full-time mahi, full-time work, and they didn't have a full-time job for me, which is outrageous, because great smile, great talk. I was amazing on the checkout. But one of my supervisors left and went to Mitre 10, offered me a full-time job. And so I left, and on my last day at the supermarket, one of my regular customers said to me, as Russell touched on, well, actually asked me where I was going, and I said, because I said it was my last day, and then I said, I'm going to Mitre 10, really excited about this. And then she said, no, you're not, and she gave me her card, and she was a practicing manager at one of the biggest law firms in the town that I was living in. So then I went there I worked one day at Mitre 10, and then I started at a law firm, and I talked a lot. So I've been told when I was little I could always be a lawyer, because lawyers talk lots. Apparently, that's the belief. So I knew that was an option. I knew that was an opportunity that I could do. But what compelled me sort of to go to university was actually, in the first instance, I wanted my head that could put kai on the table, because I saw the struggle of my parents and what they did in their absences as well, because they were working full-time is like a night shift and a day shift, and subbing in and subbing out to look after their kids. But I got that when I actually got a full-time job at this law firm. I could get dollar bills and I could put kai on the table. And then I thought, I had law grads coming in and I was like doing stuff for them, and they didn't know what they were doing, I thought. And I was like, I know more than you, so I can go off and get a law degree. I went, but I was compelled to go because I knew I could do it. It became an opportunity that I could see, I could do this. And the ceiling, there was no ceiling there. I was like, that's something I can do, and I could earn dollar bills for whānau. And then I suppose my social consciousness or awareness of things that are unfair, even though I have experienced it and witnessed it in my lifetime, but you don't articulate that when you're a child, you just feel it, and then you just deal with it. I have my mum who wrapped this up for sure with this korowai of love, so it didn't ever stop me. But I could see that, I could feel it at law school. And then I remember sitting in criminal law class, second year or something like that, and we're predominantly not Māori, but we were being spoken about as if we weren't in the room. And I felt I can look back and go, I felt really uncomfortable about it, and I didn't know why. They were talking about half our prisons are coloured Māori and they're filled with Māori, and silently I was sitting in that room saying, we're here, like I'm here, and why does this sound like this is normal? And I suppose that triggered more of the why for me, like why are Māori being seen as something that we're not good people, or we're inherently criminal, or we're on the benefit, or we're on the dole, or we take drugs and alcohol. Like, that was coming into my mind. And I should preface this of saying that when I was young, when I was a baby, my parents actively chose to move us to Australia because they wanted to create opportunities for us. They were living on the coast, and urbanisation happened. They had to move us away from home. And they just didn't have, my mum couldn't see opportunities for us, and they moved us away. Part of that, I think, is part of my story, because when we came back when I was 15, which is about half my life now, I didn't experience the shame of being Māori or the expectation that there's something wrong with being Māori. I was very secure in who I was and who I am as Māori, even though I grew up away from home and wasn't very much connected to lots of different things, our reo and culture in a more visible way. But in some ways, that meant I didn't have the burden that is put on, I feel, Māori just by existing in this country. And so when I was going through those whys, when I was at law school, I was just asking, why it seemed ridiculous to me that we were, and saw as well, that we were seen as, the messaging I was getting was that we were criminal, we were these things. And then that triggered me into moving into spaces like Just Speak. That was a group. I shift my hui and my thinking into doi often. I'll be like, oh, this feels dumb. Where am I going? I asked the next question, which is the why, and that just compelled me into the social change. But first came dollar bills, but that's...
Well, that's fair.
Yeah.
Tāwhanga, you experienced some of the same struggles as Georgina, and what, you're two generations apart? What was your story? How did you get on your feet and doing your PhD now? Was it hard to get there?
Fuck knows. Firstly, I just want to mihi to Ngāti Whātua who have the mana whenua here, ancestors past, present and future who have kept this space for us to be in. Mihi to the Auckland Museum, and also mihi to my fellow panellists, and also you for coming and listening to our kōrero tonight. Yeah, it was interesting listening to Georgina and then my hoa here, and thinking far, that kōrero really resonates. Like I remember starting university in the early 90s and thinking this is what I'm going to do, so I don't have to be on the dole. Like I feel like I'm an accidental academic. I feel like I'm an accidental artist. Like I just ended up where I am because for me there didn't seem like a lot of other options. And like I didn't pass high school. I didn't pass 7th form twice. Like, but you know I tried. And in high school I realised that it wasn't that I couldn't learn what I was being taught. It was that it didn't make sense to me. It was like, why am I learning this stuff? I know that actually there is no real future for me as a Māori person. Like growing up as a young Māori person in the 80s and 90s, it was fairly well instilled in you that there was no hope. You're a no-hoper. Like you know, you get a job in the bush, you might end up with some kids, or you'll end up in a prison. And that was it. That were the only options. And so university for me was like what I did biding my time before I went to prison, or biding my time before I got some wahine hapu and ended up in an unsatisfactory relationship that was probably going to be abusive for the rest of my life before I went to prison. Or ended up in a gang, getting fucked by my mates on a journey backwards and forwards to prison. And so for me, university was like the one thing that wasn't all of those things. And like I said, I didn't pass high school, so the first 3 years of university were figuring out what you actually had to do. Like the days at university were the sobering up periods. It was like what I wasn't doing when I wasn't drinking. And in those periods where I was sobering up, oh, okay, that's how you write an essay. Well, what's an essay about? Oh, it's about these things. It's about gathering knowledge and regurgitating it for a lecturer so that you could pass a course, so that you continue to get your student allowance. You know, like there were very, very finite boundaries of what you could do. And so during that time, I figured out the things that I needed to do to stay in university, to stay getting the pūtea that saw me through day to day. By the third year of university, like I had some full-on things happen, and I realised actually I didn't want to be a primary school teacher. I had the soul of a performer, so I was going to go to drama school, or like live out my dream and go to art school. Like I was always a very creative person, but at the same time, those were just pie in the sky kinds of ideas. And so at the start of my 4th year university, I dropped out and moved to Melbourne. I don't know, when you're 24. Well, I wasn't 24 then, I was only 22. You think, yeah, the world is your oyster, and there's no hope for me at home, so go somewhere else and try and find a place. And I did start to find a place, and it was in a really yucky kind of place, like alcohol addiction, drug addiction, the full-on kinds of things that you do when you're a young, beautiful brown person and men love your body. And during that time, I went on a haerenga to finish my teaching qualification. But as part of that, I started doing drama courses as well. And drama school was really transformative for me because all of a sudden I learnt that all of the things that I'd learning had a context. And I never really realised that before, like going through Teachers College, learning psychology of education and sociology of education and the history of New Zealand teaching and how to apply it. Didn't really understand the context of Aotearoa. When I went to drama school, it was like, okay, these plays came from war. This is what people were doing to help them make sense of the crazy European world that was fucking the entire globe up at that time. This is what they did day to day to entertain themselves, to escape the reality, to live in some kind of fantasy. And by the end of my haidinga through drama school, which I didn't finish my 10th qualification, I didn't finish my drama qualification, but at the end of drama school I was like, okay, I can be an artist, I think, because the context that I come from, I understand that. I understand what it was like to be a 10-year-old standing on the wharf protesting because some French people had blown up a boat that I didn't really know that much about, but my aunties said, you have to come with us, we're taking all of your kids to this protest. I understood what it was like to be a kid at Parihaka with all of my aunties and uncles talking about politics, protests, and all of those things, and not really comprehending it at the time, but in my adult life realising actually those are really, really important experiences as a young Māori person in the context of this box of hopelessness. So if that's my context, and I've been soaking up all this knowledge, how can I apply it? Well, as a creative person, it made sense to go to art school and to start applying it in creative ways. And then for the first time in my life at art school, I was like, fuck, you're really, really, really good at something. You're really, really good at this. You could put anything in my hand and I could make something beautiful out of it. I was like, far out. This whole time I've been living this life in this box of really, really destitute dead ends, and yet my hands could make this whole time whatever it imagined and make it really beautiful. Well, there's a contradiction. What do you do with that contradiction? And around that time, I was in my 30s by then, I was like, okay, well, I've had a really fucked up life. I know what that's like. Although in saying that, my fucked up life was really, really full of aroha. Okay, so I've had a fucked up life that's been filled with aroha. What are you going to do with that? Okay, well, you know what aroha is like. You know what it's like to be adopted at birth and grow up in a family where you spend your entire life getting to know the people around you because they seem strange. And you know that you're not really from there, but you know you belong. And you know you belong because people keep giving you something. They keep giving you this feeling that is, okay, regardless of how you're defined from the outside, we love you. We see good things in you. We see that you're a good person. So how do you share that? And that was my journey through art school. And as soon as I went to art school and started figuring those things out in a very short period of time, it was like, that's my life journey, actually. I'm going to do that for the rest of my life. And I'm just really, really blessed and privileged to have figured out that that a world of pain can equal a world of goodness if you have a way to understand, comprehend, process all of those experiences and put them to good use. And so that's probably why I'm sitting on the stage today.
Kia ora. And Richard, I read a profile where you described your ethnic and cultural heritage as fluid, which was quite a nice way of putting it. We don't often hear it in that context, and it's kind of true, isn't it? You grew up on the North Shore, but you whakapapa back to a tiny village in the Cook Islands. You have a foot in the majority and in the out-group. Is that how you see it?
Kia ora ana, whakalofilahi atu, guten Abend. Good evening, everybody. First of all, I just need to recognise that I'm feeling like an imposter here at the moment. I went to law school, hated it, realised at the Russell McVeigh Christmas party one year that if you wanted a lawyer, you could rent one. And that was it for me with law school. But to come back to your question, I do recognise every day that hybridity, which is how I describe it. Yes, I do come from a small village in Moki, which is a small island in the Cooks. Yes, my great-grandfather comes from Hamburg in Germany. My father's father was a miner on the west coast of New Zealand. He met my grandmother, who was a working class from the slums of London Pom in Sydney. So I am this hybrid mix of a whole lot of things, but also my parents were very successful in the business arena. So as a child growing up, yes, we did do pony club. And yes, we did have swimming lessons and riding lessons and music lessons. So I do come to this position from an extraordinary place of privilege, and I recognise that, but I don't check it because the media does that every day for me. Because I'm a Pacific person, so let's look at the conversation and the media around that. If you're a Pacific person, diabetes, homelessness, living in a car, you name it. You look at the education statistics for people who identify as Pacific, and they are below the average. The average wage of a woman who is a Pacific worker is way below that of a male. So I do recognise that every day, and I ponder it. But I think I'd argue that part of what my privilege is the fluidity I have, and the fact that I have access to all sorts of things. I have access to extraordinary power through the people I know. And as a journalist, you can make things happen. I have access to my family who are extraordinarily supportive. Some of them are here tonight. And I have access to a wide group of people across Auckland. And I've written about this from all walks of life. So recently I curated speakers for the Noho Marae that I run as part of the political reporting at AUT University. And we had speakers from the Prostitutes Collective. We had a former MP. We had Gilda Kirkpatrick, Annette Presley, a range of people bringing narratives into that space. And that can only happen when you have the privilege and the ability to reach into different people, to bring thinking and ideas together, to enrich the lives of your students and help them think a little bit more. But also I just want to place a thought in the middle, because I think, or I'd argue what's really important is positionality around privilege and entitlement, and they're really, really slippery areas. It's important that we recognise what we're entitled to: healthcare, really good healthcare, education, arts, culture, the things that make a society tick. And I think we need to see those not as an entitlement factor, but something that we should have as citizens in a country. And then the privilege is things that can sit on top of that. Who here has got Gold Elite on Air New Zealand? Probably some of you. And so you rock up to the check-in counter, you've bought the budget special, because that's how most of us buy our tickets. But I've got Gold Elite, I'm entitled to an upgrade. So we need to be thinking about the privilege that just comes with who we are and how we lead our lives. And I still am feeling like the imposter on the stage, because I don't have stories like yours.
It's not the vulnerable Olympics, so it's all...
Oh my God, I'm in the wrong place.
I mean, that was actually something I was going to ask about, is how do we avoid it becoming the privilege Olympics? Because that seems like it goes nowhere, that discussion, and it doesn't involve people. You know, is there a better way to talk about it than oh, you can't speak because this person is less privileged than you?
You're doing it now, aren't you all?
Well, no, this is true. I think we've acknowledged that, and let's acknowledge it again. You're all pretty privileged. Probably, you know, a lot of you live in those suburbs over there, where houses cost quite a lot of money, and you could afford the ticket for this. You know, we all have jobs here. You don't.
No, I don't.
No, true.
No, I don't, and it's well publicised that
Yes.
I've been unemployed. They just love to get into me about that, don't they?
Well, let's talk about
Oh, but
that.
aren't you on the golden superannuation? Oh, don't you get all the free flights after Parliament? No, actually, that all ended in 1999. So no, I left Parliament, yes, with my superannuation to what it was worth at that point, but it doesn't carry on afterwards or anything like that. And some of you may or may not be aware, I've suffered ill health for the last 4 years with renal failure, and just had my kidney transplant in April this year, here in Auckland as it happens, and I'm very proud of my gay kidney. So no, and my experiences, obviously one or two of us here have had with wins, is abominable. Wait till I see Tolly next time, if she still has the job.
And the interesting thing is, if you were on National Super, if you happened to be 65, no one would be thinking of you as a bludger. No one would be demanding that you account for this or that.
Sure.
There's a very big difference there, isn't it? Even though the need is equal.
Or more. Even though the need's more, we have almost a quarter of our population in New Zealand are children or young people, so under 18. If we had universal income for children and young people, and that's through their whānau and families, and we treated them the same way that we treated old people, or like young people who are old enough to get a superannuation, mature people, wise people.
I'm only 10 years away.
But it makes sense that we should invest in the beginning when we have resourcing, and we treat children like they don't have rights and they don't have voices, and they become victims of the environment that they were born into, which is beyond anything that they've done, because they haven't done anything yet. But there are pathways set in front of them, depending, are you in a low socioeconomic whānau? Like, do you have whānau who are on the benefit? Are your whānau separated? Are you coming into this intergenerational vulnerability? Has a parent been touched by the prison system? Because if that's so, you're 9 times more likely to end up in prison at some point in your life. These are all things that systemically and as a country we don't respond to compassionately or expect or whakamana our children to reach their potential. But we're very happy to do that with a generation of people who vote. And that's what power and is what we value in this community. And that's a problem. And it shouldn't be seen as a privilege, because these are rights that aren't afforded to everybody. And so that's the issues that we're talking about. Privilege isn't a swear word, but a lack of awareness or a violent blindness towards it becomes the weapon of harm.
And that, in a way, is that tallies with the classical... the classic definition of privilege, which is that some people in the running race start 20 metres ahead of some others. Do you believe there are practical fixes for that? I mean, how much of it's practical and how much of it's attitudinal? How much of it's...
Well, I do think both.
Well, attitudinal most certainly has to change, but that we developed as a country this sort of them and us attitude like that. I think when we were settled, there was an egalitarian thought behind how we wanted our country to be. We didn't want it to become a class system like it had been in England, but it's sort of what it's become. It's where we are now. The huge disparity in wages, for example. The huge, Mr. Teo sparing $8 million for his package this last year, compared to the person working behind the reception desk at Wynns, who's barely earning more than I'm getting on the benefit, and yet they're working there and having to tolerate my outrage at them because it's such a dehumanising experience in that place. And that's exactly what it is. Well, I can't blame the person behind the counter simply because he is only delivering a policy that comes from above the government and their policy at that time on how they're going to make, well, this particular one, the caretaker one, a disincentive to be on a benefit. First of all, they have forgotten there are entitlements. And I know there are some out there who live in Paratai Drive and Remmers that don't want to hear you talking about entitlement. Get out there and work, man, like we did. Oh, yeah, but I, as an individual, never had the luxury of inheritance, for example. I never had the luxury of great wealth made of my own that could set me up. Oh, I've had moments in my life, Parliament being one of them, and they love to say to you, that'll be the best money you ever earn in your life. They denigrate me for doing well. And then I fell off and tumbled down the greasy pole, and down I went, and they all sit back and enjoy watching it. And others who feel compassion about it. Now that's the real New Zealand. The real New Zealand are those that bear compassion with fairness. That's what I believe we were built on. I'm sounding like a Labour Party speech now, but but truly. But truly. And Russell, I think we've lost some of that compassion from sectors of our society who are doing okay, mate. all right, but a vast majority of us are not doing quite that okay. And I cannot believe the people who are working every hour God sends to them, earning what should be good money, and they still can't put food on the table all the time. They can't send their kids to school or the schools they would like to. They are struggling, and it shouldn't be like that. These are people in the middle class, for God's sake. I was brought up middle class and did quite well with I had a privileged upbringing as well. That's why later in life, when I got into politics, I could mix very easily between the highbrow and the lowbrow, because I had been brought up, had 2 years, my intermediate years in boarding school. So good, solid, set there. I had potential before I transitioned. And when that happened, well, the world just fell apart. And I suddenly was not going to be entitled to anything because you're scum of the earth. And therein lay the pathway that one had to take for a while. I nearly killed myself a few times, tried to, but didn't succeed, thank God. And, but there wouldn't have been any help for that. Pack raped in Sydney in 79. And when somebody said to me after that event, well, why didn't you go and report it to the police? Oh, excuse me, like the law was going to protect me? I don't think so. And it wouldn't have. I was in Australia at the time, sure, but I was just a black Maori queen from New Zealand. And, like anyone would take me seriously. Oh, but you asked for it. Look what you do for a job. Thank God, 20, 30 years later, I could stand in that parliament and defend why I supported prostitution reform in this country. Now, there was a privilege, a huge privilege, that I ended up having put in my hands through the good people of the Wairarapa, to be able to make changes like that. Not that they wanted me to support that, but they shouldn't have elected me. Well, you've got to take political risks. You truly do if you're going to be a genuine politician. You do have to take political risks sometimes. I did it on civil unions, I did it on prostitution reform, and then I was disobedient over foreshore and seabed, and look where it got me as far as promotion was concerned. Now here we talk about parliamentary power and influence and things that go on. A clique of people run it. And then you've got all of us little workers underneath who are scrambling up that greasy pole because they want to become a minister, because then you've got your hands on the purse strings of something or other, and all of that sort of thing. And I got passed over numerous times, while others of my colleagues, for their efforts toward getting the foreshore and seabed through, ended up with ministerials. I will never have my palm crossed with that kind of silver. It is not honourable. What can I say?
And therein lies the foundation of the problem, because here we are inheriting a system that is founded on quite oppressive and exclusionary ways of being in the world. And I think we're encouraged to forget that that the current system that we all ascribe to, we forget its whakapapa, we forget where it comes from, we forget how it's been used over the past 2,000 years to subdue and oppress people, and we've been forgetting the rationale behind why that system is in place. It's to benefit just a few people. And I had this really profound experience last year. I was having a really bad day, and I was feeling really sorry for myself at the Grand Canyon. And I'd been hosted beautifully by Native American people on that haerenga. And a few days beforehand had been had a complete kind of reality overhaul visiting Sand Creek, where there was a massive massacre of hundreds of Native American people who were being sheltered by the people who ended up massacring them. And I was feeling really bad about the reality of Native American experience that I was engaging in, being hosted by. And all of a sudden I was like, holy fuck, how dare you? How dare you feel so bad about the world that you live in when you've been hosted beautifully by these people who have been incredibly harshly marginalised, violently subdued, and here they are hosting you, and look at the landscape, this big hole in the ground that you can wonder over and marvel over for an entire day, because it's just this huge gash in Papatūānuku. And You know, in that moment I was like, fuck, I'm a really privileged person, and all of the shit that I've been through in my life is inherently better than the majority of my relations at the moment. And here I am as a Māori person, visiting Native people in the States, and I'm inherently more privileged than they are at the moment. And it was really full on to look at that big, vast gash in Papatūānuku and to contemplate my own privilege and to realise, yes, you know, I've been HIV positive for nearly 20 years. I'm in an in-between gendered space. I've had a lot of really negative experiences in my life. But here I am at the Grand Canyon being hosted by these beautiful people, sharing their knowledge, having the opportunity to share my own. That's a privilege. And I think if we were all able to ground ourselves on the knowledge that regardless of who we are and what our experiences are, that we're always going to be more privileged than somebody else in the world, well, that's the responsibility it takes. That's the practice it takes. That's the attitudinal change that it takes to start having practices that we own and become more accountable to, because I think that's what misses in the discussion around privilege. We're all privileged. I mean, look at the country we live in. We live in an incredible country. My tupuna, I'm a direct descendant of Hoturoa and Ngātorerangi. Those two tohunga, they brought Ngāti Ohomarangi people from various parts of the moana to Aotearoa for me to enjoy this beautiful space that I live in, surrounded by beautiful people, a country full of resource. There's no reason that anyone in Aotearoa should be hungry. Look at all the space we have in this country, and yet the majority of beings that inhabit the majority of our space, they're cows. Like, you know, cows get it really good in Aotearoa while people are living on the street trying to feed themselves. So here we are, as privileged New Zealanders, living in this beautiful space, and we don't acknowledge it enough. We spend most of our lives like this, engaged in this tiny space here, relating to the rest of the world. Well, that's a fiction. What's real is right in front of you, actually, beyond the phone. And if we're able to start seeing the beautiful space that we live in, the blessings that we have in our lives, the things that we've done in our life that directly impact positively on the lives of other people, if we remember those things all of the time, that encourages a way of thinking that helps us to be more mindful and more accountable to our privilege.
I do want to say, though, I do think that there's... yes, we have relative privilege as a country. We have a rich resource and a small population and the power to impact and influence change, which is why it's unacceptable that we have such growing inequity in this country, that we have growing homelessness, that we have growing child poverty. Those things are unacceptable. And whilst you have people who... there will always be someone you're more privileged than. Privilege is not a swear word, it's an awareness of opportunity and systemic privileges, or it's a matter of having more opportunities than other people. So what do we do as people where we can influence change for people who don't have the same voices as those of us who might be in a certain space have more privilege than others. And I do think that there's power within the Kāwanatanga space, within governance, to influence the change. And we talk about how we fund our whānau, our children, and the families that they live in. How do we fund our education and healthcare to make sure that there's adequate access? In New Zealand, there is so much hope given how small our population and how we have our parliament, or like invisible parliament at the minute, but that we can make a decision, we can influence change within a law and see almost immediate changes. Like in the criminal justice system, for example, we know that it costs over $1 billion every year to run our prison systems. We spend $108,000 to keep one person in bed, knowing that when they come out, they're likely to come back in. We're not really spending that money very well, but it's more than just the pūtea side of things. And at the same time, we have people who are living in homelessness and kids who are going to school without shoes. And this, again, it's not the vulnerable Olympics or the privileged Olympics, but there is power with the awareness of opportunities that some of us may have more access to, and then what is our role to try and influence change to make sure that everyone in this country should be able to enjoy the resource that this country that we have. So I think there's individual accountability and awareness to be like, oh, I can do whatever I want to, but that's hard when you might have that same belief if you're someone else is standing at the top of the stairs and you're at the bottom. It's going to take a lot more, and it'll take a lot more belief in yourself to do that. And we shouldn't put on people that they have to be exceptional with their beliefs and somehow get through the fact that they have material, they're living in environments without the same access to materials and stuff. So there's still a responsibility. Privilege comes with responsibility wherever we sit, and it's not a swear word, and it's not saying that you've done anything wrong, because we should all have warm accommodation, have kai, and have the opportunities to reach our potential in our lifetimes.
Yeah, privilege is about acknowledging and being responsible for the things that are right in us. You know, like, I think if everyone were encouraged to have faith in the things that they bring to this world, instead of constantly being framed in a deficit manner that beats you down, then we'd have a lot more ability to strategize and to invest our mana in each other rather than the structures we so constantly pursue. I totally call what you were saying, but in what you were saying, I kept hearing government. I kept hearing words that were about the systems, about how we engage in the systems. And while, yes, that is true, we do need to engage in the systems, what we forget in engaging in those systems is that what we're really dealing with are people. And when you're in a system, when you're in a structure, when you're in a governance structure or you're in an educational institution, the mana of the institution takes over. The mana of the governance structure takes over. And so people become faceless. And our responsibility is to remind everybody that we engage with how powerful we are as individuals, but also how beautiful they are. Looking like I do and coming from the village that I come from, I constantly get hauled up by police. What are you doing? What are you doing around here? Oh, I live here. Where do you live? That kind of suspicion. And what I've noticed with police and customs officials, you just crack a little joke about how good your legs are, or how pretty you look today. And instantly, that person that is part of a structure, governance structure, the police, policing the laws of the Queen of England in this country. You crack a joke with a policeman, that policeman turns into a person with a whānau all of a sudden. And it's a challenge because you don't want to go against the system, because the system and the structure is so powerful and overwhelming that you get scared of it. But if you're able to be responsible to yourself and overcome that wero and remind the person within the structure that they're a person, well, a whole world opens up.
Although there's statistical fact in that, because we know structurally, for example, in this country, Māori are more likely to be stopped by the police, more likely to be charged, more likely to be prosecuted, and more likely to be imprisoned for the same thing than a non-Māori. And it takes a lot individually to overcome and deal with that system when it's engaged, when you're in it. But that doesn't take away. I hear you. We do not get mana motuhake, or our mana does not come from the system, but the system is something that exists around us in everything that we touch. Everything that we do from this room, from the wine that we're drinking, is impacted by laws, and that's made in a beehive by 120 or 121 people who are meant to represent us. And so there's power in that is unsolicited in some ways. And so I believe change happens in your cups of teas around the table, with your parents, in the outside, we're activists in different ways, but there is a huge responsibility on those who wield power in Parliament, and I don't believe it's practiced well all the time, most of the time, and sometimes you lose the face, you lose the people when you're talking numbers and you're talking words. But the power that the things that happen through that house come, that's a huge responsibility, and we need to, those of us who can be bothered activating in that sphere need to keep doing that. But that sphere is not the answer to everything that's in the world.
Richard.
Let's look at some of the ways that you can empower people. And there was a National Party MP a few years ago who said they need to lift themselves up by their bootstraps. That's great if you've got boots and straps to lift yourself up by. So if you look at the place of the academy or the university or the polytechnic or anywhere where somebody gets employed and trained, it's about finding a way to work with those students. Now, I do have some colleagues here, but they're also in the space that I'm in. I don't think if you have had something happen in your family, you need to fill out 1 million forms on the online system for an extension. So I like to work with my students that way to get around things. A few years ago, in a paper I was leading, a student said to me, I don't really want to do a portfolio of stories. I said, well, 60%. She said, can I write a novel? I said, why not? I'm not going to be able to get it moderated by anybody in the department. You need to keep your gob shut. And let's try and find a publisher. It was an extraordinary piece of work. That's what you do. We now have 6 Pacific and Māori students in Year 3 of the Bachelor of Communication Studies. That's the biggest number we've had ever. But it has been very difficult for them, along with the other things they do, because their lives are much more complex. Somebody passes away, somebody does something. Their lives are much more complex than a lot of the other students. So we need to work with them to give them the tools so that they can be the power brokers and the decision makers at a later stage. And I'm going to talk about RNZ here. I have written about this. But when I was there as the Pacific Issues correspondent, I could not get anything about Anzac Day and the Niue population on the bulletin. But then we had our Niuean sub-editor, Lito Vilisoni, and because she understood the context of the 160 people from Niue who went to World War I, we were able to do that. So it is about staircasing, it is about infiltrating these spaces, and it is about having the courage to speak up, which I think every person is doing here, and challenge those ways of being, those institutionally and structurally Eurocentric, Anglocentric, colonised, often racist ways of looking at things, and having the courage to actually say, I am not having this. And a good example of that is when I was on the Pacific People's Advisory panel to Len Brown, and we had this well-meaning person come in, and she said, you do know that there is a library here for your use? And I'm going, there's a former Prime Minister here, 3 PhDs, what are you thinking, speaking to us like this, you insignificant, ignorant little... It was gobsmackingly difficult. So I just said to her, and I wasn't going to swear, but other people have, I said... I just said,
people.
Are you fucking kidding me? What is this? And she looked at me and I just said, don't ever speak to people like this in that way. Just don't do it. And you need to fuck off. Yeah. So, sorry, but, it's challenging.
I got the wind up and I feel like we've hardly begun. So maybe we could rattle through a few short answers.
Yes.
We're both journalists, Richard. What role do the media have to play in this? And one thing I'm thinking of is Kirsty Johnston wrote a powerful story just before the election about hospital admissions due to malnutrition in Auckland. She tried to get a hunger story up for most of the year, and the view of the editors was, well, people won't really relate to that because hungry children isn't a thing. It really only flew when she got the hospital admission numbers. What do you make of that?
There are a lot of editors and people in positions of power who really need to rethink their job. And it is up to journalists to push and find really good stories. We, as journalists, set the agenda. We are, despite the rise of social media, we are what people consume, we're what people read, we're what informs people. We listen, we read, and journalists must be stronger and fight harder and push to surface those things that are disruptive and make us feel uncomfortable. But that's about courage. That's about believing in your story and fighting for it. And in the case of the Herald, that's about taking the editor to task and saying, I've got a really good story and someone else is going to break it, and if they do, we're going to look stupid.
And yet, nonetheless, these statistics exist. Julia could quote you all the stats about crime. Is that enough? I mean, is there a point where if people do absorb that, they can say, this isn't even in my interest? I mean, something like kids going to school hungry is a generational economic and social problem that's going to cost everyone. Is it that simple of people understanding that there is there is massive deprivation and lack of privilege.
I wish it was that simple, because then we wouldn't be talking about this today. And I think there is a huge role for media to influence public consumption around the issues. I think we've got I went to Ngā Manu Kōrero just a couple of weeks ago, which is the National Secondary Schools speech comp, and it's mainly Māori. They speak in Māori and speak in Pākehā, and they speak so amazingly. It's like, that's TEDx right there, and I think if all New Zealand was there, we wouldn't have racist New Zealand, because they'll see the potential of our kids on stage. Anyway, where was I? But one of the kids on stage said, they were talking of some issue, and they were talking about how don't just look at us as we are now, look at us as what we can be in the future. And I believe in all of these things, and was pretty much saying how they have all these opportunities. But when they listen to the media, they're going to start believing them soon. And I think that when we hear statistics, one of the harmful things is, and that I get from that message, is that it becomes normalised and therefore becomes acceptable. And so what do we need to do to reignite the hearts and minds of people, so that we're not just hearing numbers and we're seeing the faces, and we're seeing the children, we're seeing the people, we're seeing our mokopuna, we're seeing the next generations, because we have intergenerational harm that as a country, for a number of different reasons, we tolerate. So we tolerate the numbers, we tolerate the social harm, and we put it on the individual. I think there's a huge role in our central government on how they influence that, and the culture of why they put through policies and laws, and in media. The power of media is phenomenal. So, the way that we engage, people know the numbers, we know the evidence, but how is it going to be consumed in a way that moves people to want to do change?
Now, I did say we were going to take some questions from the floor. Paul Bushnell, are you there with the mic? He will be our mic runner. Please do make them questions. I know that you've got lots to say, because this has been fascinating. And in fact, while Paul gets here, I would point out...
Can I just make one brief statement while you're talking about that?
Yes.
In teaching people how to report Māori, often the students will say, but that's racist reporting. You're writing it from a Māori perspective. I've never heard anybody say that's businessist reporting when you're getting them to do a business story, or that's sportist. So there is that major fault line as a country we need to cross. It's a Māori story, or a Pacific story, or an Asian story from a different perspective. Check your positionality and do the story.
Also, as Pākehā, how many stories do you report about crime that got Māori names, and you have to name that they're Māori? And there's so many good news stories. You can choose your agenda, and you can choose what you're reporting on. So it's not just so much, this is a Māori news story. If you're going to do a Māori news story, then let's talk about our kids at Ngā Manu Kōrero. Let's talk about the how we're doing it now and on the ground in the communities. Let's share those stories. Let's not continue to share what is now normal and makes it okay for us to tolerate the intergenerational entrenchment of Māori as a people. And all the negative stats and stuff. So that's...
let's report financial company directors as Europeans. Failed European financial company director. And can we talk to their families and the community to see how they feel about the failed finance company?
Yeah, I mean, we have to think about intent. I mean, you know, do we name every single Pākehā that's in the paper every single day? I don't think so, as Pākehā, you know? There's a reason why the media identifies people in particular ways. It's about labelling. We need to think about what the intent of the stories that come out through the media are. I mean, what is the media at the end of the day? The media is a space in between us and reality. Well, do I actually need something in between me and reality to tell me what today looks like? I don't think so. And that's because I have an intent in my heart about the kind of person I want to be and the kind of world that I want to see. And as a researcher, I know that it's very, very easy to take a number and all of a sudden not to see that number as a person anymore. Well, with statistics, what we need to remember is that every single number that we see in a statistic is Tāwhanga. Every single number is a person with a family, a person who is loved, a person who is cared for by maybe even just one person or just their cat. But that person has value. And I think we need to think about the intent behind the rationale of storying people in particular kinds of ways. Is the intent to empower that group of people, or is the intent to sensationalise how miserable their lives are? And often
right, now we are going to go to the audience, because I promised... Right, I guess we can rattle through 3 or 4. We've gone on about 15 minutes too long already, but yes, you sit down the front. The white man.
Thanks very much. This one's for Julia. Given the history of our legal system, starting with the Land Court and most recently the Seabed and Foreshore Act, I'm interested, you still seem to believe that change can occur through the legal system for Māori? Is that how you feel?
I believe it's one avenue. When I got married to the law, which was you have to get admitted and a judge, you marry the law. Got married to the law. I stood up and my kōrero said that as I enter this relationship, I'll try really hard not to get disbarred, still trying. But I'm here because I recognise that the tools of the law have been used historically ever since they've been introduced in the Western law into this country that to disadvantage Māori, have been used to harm Māori. Like you talk about the foreshore and seabed, we talk about the Tāwhanga Suppression Act, we talk about like all of these different pieces of legislation in time have actively created worse off outcomes for Māori. So I can see the harm it does. I believe that if you can influence the law it's about a reduction of harm. I don't think that the solutions to change exist in the law. I just recognise that everything we do is influenced by the law. And I'm part of the reasons why I'm not actively lawyering is it hurt my heart too much to be on a social, to be dealing one-on-one with whānau or people, to be doing stuff and knowing you're not actually kind of affect change, you're just trying to get the least amount of harm for them in that moment. And so I'm very motivated to do systemic change, and I think the law has a large power to do that. But change doesn't happen around the legal, just in the law. It happens in your whānau, it happens with how you raise your kids, it happens with how you clean your house, it happens in so many different ways. But that's just one way where I always go, where can you be most useful? And right now that's where I see I feel motivated to be most useful because these are the tools I'm learning and having. So.
Right, next
Can
question.
I just mention a fact? The Foreshore and Seabed Act no longer exists. It was repealed with the Coastal and Marine Taku Taimoana Act that
Still does
the
the same
National
thing.
Party put in. It was only different by about a paragraph and gave Māori the right to go to the court, but the hoops to which they have to jump are almost impossible.
Yeah.
Next person, put your hand up, and while Paul is getting to you, I will ask a question from the internet. And quick answers, because we are running out of time. From Jess Joy Ward, each of you have spent time living overseas. How do you think that has influenced your view of and your ability to view Aotearoa?
Well, for myself, 9 months in Sydney, Australia does not living overseas make, but I have been fortunate enough to be overseas, and one of the most satisfying experiences I had was to go to Nepal and to deal with the Nepalese Parliament at the time, who was drafting their new constitution at that time. And so it gave me an idea of what, real poverty, as they call it, can look like, and deprivation on the one hand, in a country that had been quite torn apart at that time. And I made a contribution to their human rights chapter of their new constitution to include the third sex. Now, Nepal is the first country in the world to include the third sex, or the third gender, if you want to put it that way, into protections in their constitution. India soon followed. Yet we grizzle over here in this country about something called gender identity, which I did have a bill in Parliament, got knocked down because we had a very conservative Parliament after the 2005 election, couldn't get the numbers. Came to a plan B, which isn't quite good enough. So that should be, brought up again. But that overseas experience helped me think that we as New Zealanders and our experience can contribute to another nation, small as it may be, like Nepal, and that my small contribution to that chapter of their human rights, because I was the world's first out transsexual to be elected into a parliament and to be the mayor. No, I have to make that qualification about out. I don't know how many went before me who could never be out, if you know what I mean. And so there we are, and many other New Zealanders Hillary for another example regarding Nepal. Many other New Zealanders have made a contribution overseas, and we should be proud of that, and I'm sure we are. But that was just my experience of being able to...
I mean, there is actually something worth bearing in mind, is that in world terms, all of us in Aotearoa are 1%ers. I think we sometimes lose sight of that. I'm going to go to this woman over here.
Kia ora, panel. First, can I just say that it's absolutely a privilege to be listening to your stories, and thank you so much. I've been moved to tears a few times, so kia ora for that. My question is, I feel like watching all the stuff that's going on around us in society today, I feel like we're on this like terrible ball that's just rolling down a hill, and we're never gonna, we're just gonna hit the bottom and it's all gonna implode and it's gonna be terrible. And I feel like, we mentioned systems a few times tonight, and I wonder how positive you feel for the future, whether that future is in the next 20 years or the next 50 years, where we make our system, we move away from that European Western system and move back to, I think what would be much better is that communal looking after each other system, and seeing each other for other beings, and the importance of taking care of each other and honouring the spirit of each other and how we live. So I just wondered how positive or not you guys might feel about that.
Well, I'm optimistic for New Zealand in a broad sense. In a very broad sense. I've just returned from the United States, where I was one of 16 scholars pondering American politics. And actually, aside from some of the extraordinary deprivation and stuff here, I'm optimistic, but we need to know how to play the ball and how to play the ball better. And playing the ball better is knowing the rules, pushing the ref or the parliament or whoever, using the structural systems, getting more people playing that game. And playing it sometimes aggressively if needed.
Yeah, and underhand.
If needed.
Well, I mean, any system is fallible. And I think we forget our power as tricksters. We are, we whakapapa te Māui. It's part of who we are, to trick ourselves and trick the world around us, and we have the mana to do that. I feel extremely optimistic about our future, not just in Aotearoa, but globally. Because if you look at young people today and you have kōrero with them about the world that they occupy, it's a very different world. And sometimes I don't quite get it. But I'm allowed, I'm 41, and I'm allowed to not get their world. But when I hear the kinds of ideas they have, and when I hear the kinds of thoughts they have, and how politicised they are, and how aware of the power structures that govern them they are, I'm like, wow, actually that's quite fascinating. And I'm really affirmed by what you talked about in terms of community, and community engagement and engagement with other people, because I think we're getting to a point in our global histories where we can see how fallible and how biased the systems that we participate in are. And just bringing it back to my friend's response over here, and with regards to that question, we need to use the tools and our knowledge of the tools that we have to enact change from the bottom up. So on the one hand, we're working in this space. On the other hand, we're working in this space to meet in the middle. And I think that can happen. Like a life of hopelessness in the space of 5 years being transformed into a life where I see a really positive future. I mean, I'm a sensitive person. I'm an artist, I feel things. And I'm really responsive to the world around me. And it feels bizarre to live in a world where I feel hopeful, because I've never had that in my life, and something is driving that.
Right, I've actually got the signal that says you really, really, really have to stop now. I actually don't want to, because this is great, but we do have to stop. I'd just like to add that I'm optimistic because however bad we think things are, there are far fewer people dying of preventable diseases, and far fewer people starving, and far fewer people in extreme poverty globally than there were 20 years ago. So we can get better. Anyway, I would just like to echo one of our Twitter correspondents, the Sweet Mix Kids DJs, good DJ crew, who say, this panel should be our next government. What say you?
They have to ask Winston. And I'll say no.
Right, you're going to Parliament. I'm going to make you.
I should just
Anyway,
say my name means chasing votes, Whaipooti.
Yeah,
Look, stop talking. Otherwise, we'll never stop. Hey, you've been so attentive, and you can tell when the audience is listening and getting into it, and you certainly have. So give yourselves a clap as well.
Yeah.
And if you can, do stick around for more White Man Behind the Desk, because it's going to be good. And one more clap for the panel, please.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, didn't you get to do your...
I'm gonna do another one. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Kia ora everyone. Hi. Never mind. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Kia ora everyone. For those of you that can stick around, thank you so much. You're my favorites. And to the rest of you, I understand and forgive you. I just want to start by saying we're going to try and make things fun, have a nice time. We're going to do one more monologue. Russell, if I could just get you, can I just get your help with just one thing? Could you just pick a number between 10 and 20 that isn't 18, please?
14.
What was that?
14.
14, okay. Thanks, guys. Kia ora, good to see you. How you doing? Still good? Still feeling good? It's going to be okay. It's going to be a fun one. We're going to do... You sure about 14, Russell? Yeah, no, that's cool. No, 14. Okay, so 14 is, we're going to lift the tone. 14 is, Nazis. Mitchell, could you prep? You able to prep Nazis, Mitchell? Would that be cool? Okay, thanks, man. Okay, cool. Are there any, white guys in the audience? This is going to get a little uncomfortable for you, but if you could just stick through it, that'd be great. So the one on alt-right and Nazis, Mitchell. Okay? So just everything that's going wrong. Okay, great. Okay, I'm ready.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Kia ora, my name is Robbie, and I'm another white man behind a desk, and we are live at late 2017. You did it. That's right, white man behind a desk. Now, when we came up with that title, we thought it'd be fun and silly. Unfortunately, due to the rising prevalence of what can only be called a bit of a Nazi vibe, we're a little concerned that we might be attracting a different audience, like a prouder audience. Some Māori and Pacifica students are fearing for their safety at the University of Auckland because in response to the European Students Association, German neo-Nazis have recently held a rally outside Berlin and a woman has been killed protesting a white pride march in Charlottesville, Virginia. So, how did we get back here? How did everyone's favorite example of evil come back into vogue? To answer that question, let's go all the way back to 1999. Whoa! It's 1999. Everything's going great. Enron stock is soaring. Putin's going to lead Russia into a new age of transparency, and Al Gore will lead America into the fight against climate change. So it's 1999. Things are looking up. Yeah. Now, amongst this mood of global optimism, a man named Hiroyuki Nishimura has just created 2chan. It's a message board site with the anonymity people need to just be themselves. Unfortunately, sometimes it's best for people to not be themselves, especially when they're pedophiles and Nazis. So, obviously, then we got the American-based 4chan, and when that became too censored, we got 8chan. And a new form of humour started to develop across the Chan sites as edgelords pushed comedy into bold new directions. It was all very exciting. After all, if edgy comedy could make South Park great, why couldn't it do the same for 4chan? unfortunately, thoughtful satire and being a dick aren't the same. Some 4chaners thought it was increasingly hilarious that people thought they were actual Nazis instead of what they really were, sophisticated ironists who like to pretend to be Nazis by saying all the things that Nazis say. And then came 2008. Whoa, oh my God, it's 2008 now. Everybody panic. New Zealand just got the iPhone, which is like the iPod with texting. Obama's telling everyone, don't worry about the last 8 years. Everything's getting back on track. And by the time he's elected, America has finally entered the long-awaited post-racial era. So that's great. It's 2008, and everything's looking up. Meanwhile, a man named Richard Spencer has just invented the term alt-right, which sounds much better than neo-Nazis. His organization, the National Policy Institute, has begun to use Chan culture to promote his racist agenda in the hopes that young men innocently fishing for memes on the internet might end up hooking themselves a tasty piece of race hate. Now, from this point on, the strange frogman Pepe will never be the same. And for those of you over 35, that joke will not make sense. Now, it's 2016! Oh my God, whoa, hey, it's 2016. We're gonna keep doing this, okay? So you're just gonna have to get into that 2016 thing. Oh my God, it's 2016! Oh, absolutely, I'm glad you're with it now. Not only has Obama not ended any of the wars, now he's got ISIS. So we've all got ISIS now, we're dealing with ISIS, and your favorite celebrities. They're gone. They're all dead now. But on the other hand, it's Hillary. It's not Bernie. You're not allowed Bernie, but it's Hillary. You know, she's fine. And the alt-right has grown into a big old political force, apparently. So now Trump's president. So, okay, that's a bit of a curveball there. We got a Trump and the online Nazis. They're offline Nazis. They're just regular old Nazis. It's not ironic anymore. They're not even a little. They're doing the heils. They got the tiki torches. So I guess at this point things aren't really super looking up. Look, if these all sound like a random bunch of abstract ideas that I've kind of just thrown together, you should know that a guy called James Alex Fields Jr. Shared Pepe memes on Facebook. And he also marched with a white supremacist group called Vanguard America, who recruits students at universities. And then James went to a march in Charlottesville, and then, allegedly, he got into his car and he started it and he drove it into a crowd of people. And he killed a 32-year-old woman named Heather Heyer. So obviously, no one starts out wanting to be a crazy, murderous racist. But that's not necessarily how radicalization happens. It's not about signing up to some terrorist boot camp. It's a gradual shift of ideas. You can do it yourself, at home, online. It's so easy. Just say you're mildly annoyed that the New York Times gave Ghostbusters a good review, even though it wasn't that great. And then you spotted a funny meme about hypocrites on Tumblr, and that led you to a thoughtful think piece against affirmative action, and that made you think about defending the value of European culture, which led you to Google, which reinforced the idea that pride in your own people is valid, and soon you're reading false or misleading statistics about crime committed by immigrants, and the New York Times was wrong about Ghostbusters, so it's probably wrong about these immigrants too, and now you're writing arguments online and finding the people who listen to you and respect your opinion, so you've got to join them at the rally, because god damn it, you've got to fight for the truth. And now people who don't understand how you feel are ranting at you, and they say that you don't matter, and now your key is in the ignition. So let's just back up here, okay? If you're at any point on this path, let's have a chat, okay? Everyone else, I don't know, you can mute the video or just skip ahead to when I do this. Everybody in the room, you're stuck here. You've got no choice. I'm sorry. You had your chance. You chose to stay, and I'm very grateful. Okay, look, if you're on that path, then you are wrong about gender and race, but you are right about one thing. Your feelings are valid, and they are real. We white men were in charge of everything for a really long time, to the point where we started seeing ourselves as the main kind of human being. that stories about women were feminist stories, and stories about people who weren't white were cultural stories, but stories about white guys were just normal, universal human stories. That time is over now. And we're coming to terms with the fact that we are just another minority group. And that is a big adjustment. That is a huge seismic shift, and it's confusing. And with confusion comes a writhing, fighting pain. But this change is really fucking good for everyone else. So we're going to have to deal with it, okay? Don't let people tell you that your pain isn't real, okay? Your pain is real and it sucks, okay? Our suicide rates are really high, but the solution is not defensiveness and anger. There's another path, and it doesn't mean you have to pretend that Paul Feig did a good job with Ghostbusters, okay? He fucked that shit up. It just means relaxing for a bit and realizing that this change isn't only good for everyone else, it's also good for us. We can be whatever we want to be now. We don't have to be James Bond or Luke Skywalker or Batman. We can let women run stuff and people of other races. We don't have to be constantly having sex with supermodels or saving the day, because the fact is, running Gotham was super stressful. And when it comes down to it, Batman was always a bit of a twat. Get back in. You can come back in. Now, a lot of you aren't Nazis, and that's really good. Obviously, not that hard to not be a Nazi, but you have made the right choice, so good job there. When something like Charlottesville happens, the bar for not being racist gets really low. All you have to do to show the world that you're not a bad person is to not agree with the angry, murderous Nazi mob. You might have used the "this is not us" hashtag, but that doesn't mean you're not also choosing, to sit next to another white person on the bus for the whites amongst you. Being a Nazi, as it turns out, not the only way to be racist. A little bit of a surprise there. As society progresses, the number of people who say they're not racist, who say they're racist, goes down. Unfortunately, people who say they're not racist can still do racist things, like make less eye contact with people of different races. The fact is, we're probably all a bit racist, and that's okay. No, not that. Definitely not what I just said. Definitely not okay. It's bad, and we need to fix it. But what I mean is, it's not your fault, okay? You're a product of society, and society is a bit racist. But the way to fix it isn't to pretend that racist thought never happened. What you can do is identify when you have a prejudiced thought, and then, in a non-judgmental way, think about why you had that thought and try to replace it with something else. It's really uncomfortable to confront these things about ourselves, but just do your best, okay? We can get better. Easy. It's 2017, and things are looking up. Thank you.
Robbie Nicol. Just one more thing. Well, actually, two more things, actually, because Robbie's on that path comments, I think were written for a younger audience. But it applies, I think, to you and your kids and your grandkids. Talk about this stuff. My younger boy does read 4chan. He reads it because they talk about games in the way that they don't in other places in some of those forums. But we talk about the crap that goes on there. And I think that's kind of important. Don't freak out if your kid reads 4chan, but talk about it. And the other thing, if you like this, you'll love the next one. The next Late at the Museum, Wednesday, November 8th, is Sing It Sister, Sexism in the Music Industry. And man, there's some good talk about this going on at the moment. That is moderated by Rose Matafeo, features Lady Six, Diane Swan, Geneva Alexander Masters, and Jessie Moss. And there's also, but I can't tell you, a really exciting musical guest at that one too. So get in quick, because this one's sold out. That one's going to sell out as well. Thank you very much.
Can I buy you a drink?